The slap echoed across the entire amphitheater, not because it was loud. It wasn't, particularly, but because the silence that followed was so absolute, so complete, that even the ventilation systems seemed to hold their breath. 4,000 officers, admirals, noble-born commanders, and combat cadets from 37 civilizations sat frozen in their elevated seats, staring down at the central platform where Commander Deathworlder stood with his four-fingered hand still raised, his amber eyes gleaming with the particular satisfaction of a predator who has just reminded the room of the food chain. The human cadet hadn't moved. Cadet Marcus Vale stood exactly where he had been standing before the slap. His head had turned with the impact, yes. His jaw was red. A thin line of blood traced the corner of his mouth where his own teeth had caught the inside of his cheek, but his hands remained clasped behind his back. His eyes, when they turned back to face Commander Soral, were the color of deep water before a storm. Not angry, not frightened. Something else entirely. Something the aliens in the amphitheater didn't have a good word for, because their civilizations had evolved past the point where they needed one. Humans called it patience. Commander Deathworlder of the Kralian Dominion was not a small being. He stood nearly 2.5 meters tall, his exoskeletal armor etched with the campaign markings of 14 planetary pacifications. His species, the Kralian, had been dominant military contractors in the Galactic Coalition for 300 years. They did not lose wars. They did not accept second place. And they absolutely, categorically, did not get outperformed by primitives from a single sun mudball that had only achieved faster than light travel 47 years ago. "You will learn your position, creature," Soral said. His translator rendered it cleanly in galactic standard. "Or the next lesson will be delivered somewhere more private." The crowd did not cheer, but several of them laughed. That particular nervous laugh that beings produce when they want to signal they are on the winning side of a situation. Marcus Vale said nothing. He turned, walked back to the cadet formation, and stood at attention. That was the moment. The precise second that nobody in the amphitheater understood yet. The second that would later be replayed, analyzed, and debated in 37 governments, 14 military tribunals, and at least one emergency session of the Galactic Coalition Council. Because 5 seconds after Marcus Vale returned to formation, Commander Deathworlder, decorated war hero of the Kralian Dominion, vanished. Not dramatically, not in fire or light or any of the theatrical ways that galactic civilizations had come to associate with violence. He simply was there. And then he was not, and nobody could explain it. Not for a very, very long time. The Galactic War Leadership Academy occupied a man-made planetoid in the Orith system, a deliberate construction of the Coalition's founding species, designed to be neutral ground. No gravity weapons, no atmosphere denial systems, no military-grade shielding beyond standard meteorite deflection. The Academy was supposed to be the safest place in the known galaxy. It had never hosted a disappearance before. Admiral Dessa Lorne of the Cytherian Concordat was the ranking officer present when the incident occurred, which meant she was also the being whose desk every emergency report landed on for the next 6 hours. She was a small woman by her species standards, with pale blue skin and 3 sets of eyes stacked vertically, and she had spent 40 years developing a reputation for unshakable composure. She was composure-free by hour 2. "What do you mean the sensors show nothing?" she demanded, standing in the operations center while 24 technicians worked frantically across their terminals. He was standing in the middle of the platform. 4,000 witnesses, active biometric tracking, full-spectrum surveillance. "Admiral." The technician, a young Pathani whose neck frills were fully raised with anxiety, turned his screen to face her. The sensors show Commander Soral standing on the platform. Then the sensors show Commander Soral not standing on the platform. There is no transition event, no energy discharge, no phase shift, no teleportation signature. He is there, and then he is absent, and the sensor record contains nothing between those two states. Lorne stared at the screen for a long time. "Run it again," she said. "I have run it 41 times, Admiral." She turned to look through the observation window at the central amphitheater below. The 4,000 witnesses were still there, held for questioning. 37 species, sitting in careful, frightened clusters, talking in low voices or not talking at all. She could see the human cadets from here, a group of 12, standing together near the eastern seating block. They were the only ones who weren't talking. They were just standing. Waiting. She found that more unsettling than anything the sensors had shown her. Cadet First Rank Priya Osei had been standing 3 positions to Marcus's left when it happened. She had seen everything. She had also, in the immediate aftermath, made a series of very deliberate choices about what she was going to say to the investigators and what she was going to say to absolutely nobody. The investigators she had observed the confrontation, witnessed the slap, noted that Cadet Vale had returned to formation, and then observed the commander's absence. She had no explanation for the disappearance. All of that was technically true. What she did not tell the investigators was what she had seen in Marcus Vale's eyes in the 3 seconds between the slap and the moment he walked back to formation. She did not tell them about the slight movement of his left hand. She did not tell them about the way his breathing had changed, and then, more importantly, returned to normal with a precision and deliberateness that no human body produced naturally. She had been trained to notice things. So had Marcus. So had all 12 of them. That was the point. Ose. The investigator's name was Golt, a heavyset Morthian with a single large eye and a reputation for extracting information that witnesses hadn't meant to provide. He had been flown in within 3 hours of the incident, which meant someone had decided this was serious very quickly. You trained alongside Vale at the Terra Secundus facility? I trained at Terra Secundus, she said. So did Vale. Together, we were in the same cohort. And you'd describe him as what? Quiet? Aggressive? Unpredictable? Priya considered the question with the careful blankness she had spent 2 years perfecting. Disciplined, she said. Galt wrote something down. The commander struck him across the face in front of 4,000 witnesses, and he walked away. Yes, that doesn't strike you as unusual? For a human? Commander Soral outranked him significantly, Priya said. Marcus understood the hierarchy. Galt studied her for a long moment. His single eye was very good at conveying skepticism. Right, he said, and you have no theory about what happened to Commander Soral. I'm a cadet, she said. I wouldn't presume to theorize. The command trials had been the reason everyone was here. Once per galactic year, the Academy held open simulations, where cadets from all member species competed in increasingly complex strategic scenarios. The official purpose was recruitment evaluation. The unofficial purpose was political theater, a chance for dominant military species to demonstrate their superiority and remind the junior members of the coalition which civilizations actually ran things. Humans had been junior members for 47 years. They had sent cadets to the Academy for 11 of those years. In 11 years, no human cadet had placed above the lower third in the command trials rankings. This year, Marcus Vale had placed first. Not first among humans, first overall. Out of 412 cadets representing 37 species, including 3 Kralian cadets from noble military families, 2 Cytherian prodigies, and a Morthian who had been considered a generational talent, he had not placed first dramatically. There had been no single explosive performance. Instead, across 6 increasingly complex simulations, he had made a series of quiet, precise decisions that only revealed their brilliance 3 or 4 moves later, by which point his competitors were already reacting to the previous situation while he had already shaped the next one. The simulation judges had reviewed his performance twice, certain there was an error. There wasn't. Commander Veth Soral had been present as an observer and guest lecturer. He had watched all 6 simulations. He had watched the scores post. He had watched 4,000 officers and cadets turn to look at the human who had just beaten everyone. And then he had walked down to the platform, during the post-trial reception, and put his hand across the human's face. In his culture, it was not technically assault. In Kralian law, a dominant officer had the right to physically correct a subordinate who had caused public embarrassment, and finishing first in a trial that Kralian cadets had been expected to dominate was, by Soral's interpretation, an act of institutional humiliation. His legal team would make exactly this argument. 3 hours later, from a position of increasing desperation, as it became clear that their client was not simply missing but was missing in a manner that defied every known principle of physics. The first person to say out loud what everyone was thinking was a Pathani admiral named Kos, who had been sitting in the second tier of the amphitheater and had very good eyes. He said it quietly, to the Cytherian officer sitting beside him, while the chaos of the initial investigation was still organizing itself below. The human did it, Kos said. The Cytherian, whose name was Mira Dunn and who was attached to Admiral Lorne's staff, looked at him with 2 of her 3 pairs of eyes. The third pair was still watching the platform. There is no mechanism, she said. No energy discharge. The sensors recorded nothing. Yes, Kos said. That is the part that concerns me. Mira Dan thought about that for a moment. The human did it, she said quietly, in 5 seconds. While walking away, Kos confirmed. From a position of complete stillness, without turning around, they both looked at the cluster of human cadets near the eastern seating block. 12 humans, standing together waiting. "I have read the human historical files," Miradan said after a long silence. "The ones that are publicly available. And they are consistent with a species that fought 8,000 years of continuous warfare before achieving spaceflight," she said. "Consistent with a species that domesticated biological weapons, developed nuclear technology before interstellar communication, and produced in a single century enough munitions to destroy their own planet 300 times over." She paused. "The files emphasize that humanity has been peaceful since coalition membership." "Yes," Koss said. "They emphasize it quite a lot. Yes, as if someone wanted to make sure we believed it." Neither of them said anything else for a while. Below, investigators moved across the platform where Commander Soral had been standing. Sensor drones swept the space in careful grids. Teams of officers from 6 species combed through surveillance footage, running enhancement algorithms, searching for anything the initial sweep had missed. They would not find it. What they would find, over the following 48 hours, was something considerably worse. The investigation's first hard lead came from a coalition intelligence analyst named Boren, who had been assigned to review Commander Soral's biometric data from the moment of his disappearance backward through the entire day. Boren was thorough. Boren was also, unfortunately for everyone involved, very good at his job. He found the anomaly at the 16-minute mark before the disappearance, a microfluctuation in the commander's subcutaneous tracking implant, standard issue for all senior officers, tamper-resistant, continuously broadcasting, encrypted with coalition-grade security. The fluctuation lasted 0.003 seconds. In isolation, it meant nothing. Implants experienced microfluctuations constantly, solar interference, localized gravity variations, proximity to other electronic systems. What made this fluctuation different was what Boren found when he ran a pattern search across the Academy's full sensor archive. The same fluctuation signature appeared in the tracking data of every being who had been in proximity to the human cadets during the trial period. Not just Commander Soral. Every being, 412 cadets, 67 faculty members, 32 visiting observers, Admiral Lorne herself. All of them had experienced the same 0.003-second microfluctuation at some point in the preceding 72 hours. All of them, at different times. All of them in proximity to human cadets. Boren sat with this information for 20 minutes before he reported it, which was the most unprofessional decision of his professional life, and also, in retrospect, one of the best decisions he had ever made, because it gave him time to understand what he was looking at before he had to say it out loud. He was looking at a sweep. Someone had systematically accessed the tracking implants of every significant individual in the Academy. Not extracted data, not disabled the implants, just accessed them, touched them, mapped them. The sweep had been completed 48 hours before Commander Soral's disappearance, which meant it had been completed before the command trials began, which meant whoever had done it had known, before the trials started, that something was going to happen. They had mapped every tracking system in the building, every sensor contact, every potential witness. They had prepared. Boren reported his findings to Admiral Lorne at the 4-hour mark. Admiral Lorne read his report twice. Then she did something that surprised her staff considerably. She closed the report, set it face down on her desk, and sat very still for almost 30 seconds. Then she said, "Get me everything we have on the Terra Secundus training facility." Her aide, a young Cytherian officer who had been with her for 6 years and had never seen her look like this, said, "Admiral, that facility is human-administered. It's not in our accessible databases." "I know," Lorne said. "Request access through coalition channels. That will require authorization from the Human Directorate." "I know. They'll want to know why we're requesting." Admiral Lorne looked at her aide with all 3 pairs of eyes, which she reserved for moments of particular gravity. "Tell them," she said, "that we have questions about their training program." The response from the Human Directorate came back in 40 minutes, which was fast by coalition bureaucratic standards and therefore significant in itself. The response was 2 sentences. "Terra Secundus training records are classified under the Human Military Privacy Compact, Article 7, as ratified by the coalition in year 31 of human membership. We are unable to provide access." Admiral Lorne read it once, set it down. "Everything that is public," she said. "Academic papers, recruitment announcements, any official statements the Human Directorate has ever made about their training programs." Her staff worked through the night. By morning, they had assembled a picture that was incomplete in all the ways that mattered, and complete enough in all the ways that terrified. Terra Secundus had been established in year 12 of human coalition membership. Official purpose: Advanced Officer Development for Human Cadets selected for Coalition-level service. Enrollment, classified. Curriculum, classified. Duration of training, classified. Graduation requirements, classified. What was public? The facility existed. It was located on humanity's second colonized world. It was administered directly by something called the Directorate of Strategic Human Development, a body whose own founding documents were classified, whose membership was classified, and whose budget was listed in the Human Coalition contribution filings under the single line item, long-term investment. 12 cadets from Terra Secundus had attended the academy this year. In 11 years of human participation in the command trials, 0 previous cadets from Terra Secundus had ever attended. This was the first cohort. Lorne read the assembled report in her office as the academy's sun rose through the viewport, painting the room in pale gold, and she felt something she had not felt in 40 years of military service. Not fear, precisely. She had been afraid before in actual combat, and she knew what that felt like. This was different. This was the feeling of standing at the edge of something and realizing too late that you could not see the bottom. She was still sitting there when her emergency channel activated, and the voice of her most junior signals officer came through with the particular tight quality that young officers produced when they were trying very hard not to sound as frightened as they were. "Admiral," the officer said, "we found something in the amphitheater." "Sorrow?" "No, Admiral." A pause. "We found a message." "From who?" Another pause. "Longer this time. It's addressed to you, Admiral, personally." It was left on the commander's chair, the one he was sitting in before he came down to the platform. The officer's voice dropped to nearly nothing, the chair that was under active sensor coverage the entire time. "The sensors show nothing was placed on it, but it is there. It is physically there, and the sensors show it was never placed." Lorne closed her eyes, opened them. "What does it say?" The officer read it aloud. 4 sentences, written in clean standard galactic script, on a plain card, in handwriting that was precise and unhurried, the handwriting of someone who had written in complete calm. He touched the wrong species. "We have been patient. We have always been patient. You should ask your historians what happens when we stop." The silence on the channel stretched out for a long time. Then Admiral Dessa Lorne, 40-year veteran, unshakable, said something that her signals officer would repeat for the rest of his life, in exactly the tone she said it, because he had never heard an admiral sound like that before. "Lock down the academy," she said. "All of it. And get me a direct line to the Coalition Council. Tell them we have a situation." She paused. "Tell them we may have had a situation for a very long time, and we simply didn't know it." The Coalition Council convened an emergency session 14 hours after Commander Veth Soral disappeared. 14 hours was fast by their standards. Normally, assembling the full council required 3 days of scheduling, 2 days of protocol review, and at least 1 formal objection from the Kralian delegation about seating arrangements. The fact that they gathered in 14 hours told Admiral Lorne everything she needed to know about how frightened the senior governments already were. She presented her findings in person, via secure holographic link, standing in her office on the Academy planetoid with the message card sealed in an evidence container on the desk beside her. She presented the sensor anomalies, the tracking implant sweep, the Terra Secundus classification walls, and the card itself. She presented all of it calmly, methodically, in the order that made the picture clearest. When she finished, the chamber was silent. Then the Kralian representative, a rigid elder named Commandant Voss, who wore Soral's campaign insignia on his collar as a display of political solidarity, said, "This is a human assassination of a coalition officer. We demand immediate detention of all human cadets present at the facility." "On what evidence?" Admiral Lorne said. "On the evidence you just presented. I presented evidence of a disappearance with no mechanism and a message with no origin. I presented no evidence of human action." "The message is signed." "The message is not signed," Lorne said. "It refers to a species. That is not a signature." Voss's exoskeletal plates shifted in the Kralian expression of controlled fury. "You are protecting them." "I am applying the evidentiary standards this council established," Lorne said. "The same standards we would apply to any accusation against any member species. Unless you are proposing we abandon those standards specifically for humans, in which case I would like that proposal in writing, with your name attached, before we proceed." The silence that followed was a different quality of silence. Voss did not put the proposal in writing. Marcus Vale was questioned 4 times in the first 24 hours. 4 different investigators. 4 different rooms. 4 different methodologies, ranging from the Cytherean preference for calm, logical sequencing to the Morphean approach, which involved a single interrogation light positioned to shine directly in the subject's face for the duration of the session. Marcus answered every question with the same quiet precision he brought to the strategy simulations. Yes, Commander Soral had struck him. No, he had not responded physically. Yes, he had returned to formation. No, he had no explanation for the commander's disappearance. Yes, he had been surprised by it. No, he had not seen anything unusual in the seconds before or after. The Morphean investigator, the one with the light, kept him for 6 hours. At the end of 6 hours, he had precisely what he had at the beginning, nothing useful, and a growing personal discomfort he couldn't fully articulate. It wasn't that the human was evasive. His answers were direct. His biometrics were stable. His stress indicators, monitored continuously throughout all 4 sessions, showed the calm baseline of someone who was either telling the complete truth or had trained themselves to physiologically replicate telling the complete truth. Those 2 possibilities were, the investigator reflected afterward, very different things. Priya Osei was questioned 3 times and released without restriction, which was the outcome she had specifically prepared for. On the evening of the 2nd day, she walked to the observation deck on the Academy's northern face, a public space with a long view of open space and the distant smear of the Orith system's asteroid belt. She stood at the railing and watched the stars. After 11 minutes, she was joined by a Cytherean officer she had never met, who stood beside her and also watched the stars. "Beautiful view," the officer said. "Yes," Priya said. "I used to stand here during my cadet years," the officer said. 40 years ago. It looked exactly the same. Priya said nothing. "My name is Mira Dan," the officer said. "I am attached to Admiral Lorne's staff. I am here unofficially, in the sense that this conversation is not being recorded, and I will deny it occurred." "Understood," Priya said. "I want to ask you something that the investigators haven't asked," Dan said, "not because it didn't occur to them, because they are afraid of what the answer might be." Priya waited. "How long?" Dan asked. "The stars were very bright. The asteroid belt was a faint silver line against the black." "I don't know what you mean," Priya said. "Yes, you do," Dan said, with a gentleness that was somehow more unsettling than aggression would have been. "I have read everything publicly available about human history. I have spent the last 20 hours reading it very carefully, and I have noticed something that I suspect most of my colleagues have not noticed, because they are looking at your history the way you look at a conquered world, cataloging the ruins, measuring the damage. And how are you looking at it?" Priya asked. "Like a strategist," Dan said, "like someone who wants to understand how a species that spent 8,000 years trying to destroy itself managed to stop." She paused. "You stopped very cleanly, very completely, almost exactly when you achieved spaceflight, which is, statistically, not how species work. Species that fight for 8,000 years do not simply stop. They carry the trauma forward. They export the conflict. They find new enemies." The asteroid belt drifted. Unless, Dan said carefully, they found a way to redirect it, to channel it, to take everything that 8,000 years of war had produced and put it somewhere specific, somewhere controlled. Priya was quiet for a long time. "That's an interesting theory," she said finally. "There is a facility on your second world," Dan said. "Terra Secundus. The records are classified. I'm aware of Terra Secundus. You trained there." "I trained there." "What is it?" Dan asked, not aggressively, just the question, clean and direct. "Not what the files say. What is it actually?" Priya turned to look at her for the first time. Mira Dan had 6 eyes, which gave her face an unsettling depth of expression, and in this moment all 6 were simply waiting. Not calculating, not threatening, just waiting. The way you wait when you've decided that the answer matters more than your comfort. Priya had been trained to assess people. It was one of the first things they taught at Terra Secundus, before the strategy and before the field work and long before the things that came after. She assessed Mira Dan. Then she said, "It's a school. What does it teach?" "Everything," Priya said. "Everything humanity learned in 8,000 years of trying to kill each other. Every tactic, every psychological weapon, every method of control, disruption, disappearance, and applied consequence." She paused. "We didn't stop being good at war when we joined the coalition. We decided to be very careful about when we use it." Dan was quiet. "How many facilities like Terra Secundus exist?" she asked. "That's classified," Priya said. "How many graduates?" "Classified." "How long has the program existed?" "Since year 6 of coalition membership," Priya said. "That one I'll give you. 6 years after we joined, Someone in the directorate looked at how the coalition treated its junior members and made a decision. What decision? Priya turned back to the stars. That patience has limits, she said, and that when the limits are reached, we should be ready. The message card's paper was analyzed overnight by 3 independent forensic teams. The results arrived on Admiral Lorne's desk at hour 31, and she read them standing up because she had not slept, and sitting felt like admitting how tired she was. The paper was human manufactured, standard grade, available in approximately 400 retail outlets across coalition space. No unique chemical signatures, no traceable production batch. The handwriting analysis was more interesting. The coalition's forensic database contained handwriting samples for all registered individuals in galactic space. Biometric registration was required for coalition membership. Humans had been registered since year 2 of their membership. The handwriting on the card did not match any registered individual. It matched the statistical profile of a human writer. Pressure patterns, stroke angles, letter formation habits, all consistent with human neuromuscular development. But no match, which meant the writer was either unregistered, which was illegal under Coalition Compact, or had deliberately trained themselves out of their natural handwriting profile. Both options required a level of deliberate preparation that made Lorne's head ache. She was still processing this when her aide appeared in the doorway with the expression that meant something new had happened. "What?" she said. "We've located Commander Sorrel," her aide said. Lorne set down the forensic report. "Where?" "Holding Bay 7, her aide said. He was found seated in a chair in the center of the empty bay, unharmed, conscious. His tracking implant shows continuous signal, as if he never left." The aide paused. "Admiral, the holding bay has been under sensor lockdown since the incident. The sensors show he was never in the bay, but he is in the bay." "What is his condition?" "Physically unharmed," her aide said. "Psychologically." "What?" "He won't speak," the aide said. "He has been sitting in that chair for an estimated 2 hours, based on when our sweep team found him. He is physically capable of speech. He is simply not producing it. The medical team says there is no neurological damage. He is conscious, aware, and choosing not to talk." Lorne thought about a decorated war commander who had crushed 14 planetary rebellions, who had walked up to a human cadet in front of 4,000 witnesses and struck him across the face, who had then been absent for 30 hours under impossible circumstances. She thought about what might make a being like that decide, very firmly, not to say anything about what had happened. She thought about the message card. "You should ask your historians what happens when we stop. Set up a medical observation suite," she said. "Make him comfortable. Do not pressure him." She paused. "And find me a human historian." "A human historian?" "Civilian, academic. Someone who studies their own history rather than ours." She picked up the message card in its evidence container. "Someone who can tell me what this actually means." The historian's name was Dr. Yemi Cross, and she arrived via emergency transit from the nearest coalition academic hub 8 hours later, which was also unusually fast. Lorne noted this and filed it away. Dr. Cross was a small woman, with close-cropped gray hair and reading glasses she didn't seem to actually need, given that she never looked through them at anything. She was 71 years old, the kind of age that looked different on humans than on longer-lived species, worn rather than diminished. She accepted the tea Lorne's aide offered and sat across from the Admiral with the comfortable posture of someone who spent a lot of time in other people's offices. Lorne showed her the message card. Dr. Cross read it once, set it down, folded her hands around her tea. "Where did you find this?" she asked. Lorne explained. Dr. Cross nodded slowly, the way people nod when they are confirming something they already believed. "I'm going to tell you something," she said, "and I want you to understand that I am telling you because the alternative is worse." She looked at Lorne steadily. "Humans are not a peaceful species. I know that's what the coalition files say. I know that's what our diplomatic representations have consistently communicated. It is not accurate. Then what are you?" "We are a species that made a decision," Dr. Cross said, "when we achieved spaceflight, when we made first contact. We looked at the galaxy and we saw something that every human strategist immediately recognized." "What did you see?" "A power structure built on the assumption that violence is a specialized tool," Dr. Cross said. "That only certain species, in certain circumstances, can apply it effectively. That there are rules about who gets to be dangerous." She paused. "Humans have never believed that. We've never been able to afford to. For 8,000 years, the species that survived were the ones that understood that anyone can be dangerous, under the right circumstances with the right preparation." "So you prepared," Lorne said. "We were already prepared," Dr. Cross said. We just decided to be organized about it. Lorne looked at the message card. The historians. What do they say? What does happen when you stop being patient? Dr. Cross was quiet for a moment. Admiral, she said gently, you have a star chart of Coalition space? Lorne pulled it up on the desk display between them. The full Coalition, 2,000 inhabited systems, the familiar web of member civilizations and their territorial boundaries. Dr. Cross pointed to a cluster of dark zones near the outer rim, systems with no listed inhabitants, no recorded history of civilization, just empty space where something might once have been. What are those? She asked. Dead systems, Lorne said. Pre-Coalition, various civilizations that failed to develop spaceflight or collapsed before contact. Dr. Cross said. She pointed to another cluster. And these, same, Lorne said. And then something in the back of her mind began to assemble itself, slowly, with the grinding reluctance of a conclusion you genuinely do not want to reach. She looked at the clusters. She looked at their distribution. She looked at the dates in the system records, the dates when they had gone dark, and she saw a pattern she had never looked for because she had never had a reason to look. They were not random. They were not arbitrary. They clustered around human space like a cleared perimeter, like a defensive line, like someone had quietly, over centuries before Coalition membership, removed specific problems from specific locations. Her mouth was very dry. Those aren't failed civilizations, she said. No, Dr. Cross said. They're, Admiral. Dr. Cross's voice was still gentle, still calm. The voice of a woman who had known this conversation was coming for a very long time. The message on that card is not a threat. It's a historical reference. Every species that has pushed humanity to its limit has eventually encountered the same outcome. She picked up her tea. The Coalition has been built on the comfortable assumption that humanity's dangerous period is past, that we grew out of it, that we are safe neighbors now. And are you? Dr. Cross smiled. It was a warm smile. A real one. We are extraordinarily patient neighbors, she said. We have been patient for 47 years. We have absorbed insults and condescension and structural inequality, and we have sat in the junior seats and smiled, because we understood the value of the long game. The smile didn't change, but there are 12 cadets on this station who were trained at a facility your intelligence services cannot access. One of them placed first in your most prestigious military trial. One of your senior commanders decided to make an example of him, and now that commander has had what I suspect was a very informative 30 hours. What did they do to him? Lorne asked. Probably nothing physical, Dr. Cross said. Physical would be crude. Terra Secundus doesn't train for crude. Then what? They showed him something, Dr. Cross said. Something that made a man who has crushed 14 planetary rebellions decide that silence was the wisest policy. She set down her tea. I would suggest, Admiral, that you take the message seriously, not as a threat, as information. Someone in the Human Directorate has decided it's time for the Coalition to understand who it has been sharing space with. The star map glowed between them. All those dark systems at the edges of human territory. All those quietly cleared perimeters. How long have you been planning this? Lorne asked. Not accusingly, just needing to know. Not the incident here, the larger thing, the program, the preparation. How long? Dr. Cross stood, straightened her jacket. Admiral Lorne, she said, humanity has been at war for 8,000 years. We didn't stop. We incorporated. She picked up her glasses, tucked them in her pocket. Terra Secundus was year 6, but the philosophy is much older than that. We have been preparing for galactic membership since before we had the technology to achieve it, since before we knew what we were preparing for. She moved toward the door. You asked what happens when we stop being patient. The honest answer is, we don't know yet. It hasn't been necessary. She paused at the door. I'd recommend keeping it that way, she said pleasantly. The Coalition has been a good partner, mostly. We'd like it to continue. She left. Admiral Lorne sat alone with the star map and the message card, in the particular silence of someone who has just understood something they cannot unlearn. Outside, across the academy, the 12 cadets from Terra Secundus were released from questioning and returned to their quarters. No charges, no evidence, nothing that could be touched in a court under Coalition law. In the medical suite, Commander Veth Sorrel sat in his observation bed and stared at the wall and did not speak. The medical team noted his vitals were perfect. They noted his cognition was unimpaired. They noted, in the careful language of professionals trying to describe something without quite saying it, that he appeared to be engaged in a sustained process of internal recalibration. He would not speak for 11 more days. When he finally did, He requested immediate retirement from all active military service, cited personal health reasons, and never publicly discussed what had happened to him in those 30 missing hours. Not once. Not ever. The Coalition Council issued a formal statement 48 hours after the incident. Commander Sorrell's disappearance was classified as an unexplained environmental anomaly pending further investigation. His conduct toward Cadet Vale was noted as a violation of Academy conduct standards. A formal reprimand was issued. The reprimand was later quietly expunged when the Kralian delegation threatened trade disruption. Cadet Marcus Vale graduated from the Academy ranked first in his cohort. He accepted his commission quietly, the way he did everything. Shook hands with the officials, posed for the required photographs, answered the congratulatory questions with the same measured calm he had brought to every moment since his arrival. The photograph of him receiving his commission was distributed across Coalition news networks, a routine graduation image, but several intelligence analysts in several governments pulled it from their feeds and studied it more carefully than was probably warranted. They were looking at his eyes. In the photograph, Marcus Vale was smiling. It was a perfectly ordinary smile. Warm, professional, human, but the analysts kept looking at it, with the vague and persistent discomfort of people who have learned to pay attention to their instincts, trying to identify what it was about that smile that made them uneasy. Eventually, most of them concluded it was nothing. A few of them, the ones who were very good at their jobs, concluded something different. They concluded it was patience, raw, ancient, carefully maintained patience, the kind that had been building for 8,000 years, the kind that knew with absolute certainty that it had time,